Hello. Hello. Woo! Boom. Guess what we're going to read today? I have discovered boxes of Mr. Men and Little Miss books. Let's see if they're a bit of fun. What do you reckon? Do you think that's a good idea? I'd say that's a yes from this humongous TY. Okay, well, and look, I was just looking in the rooms too. Look at all these gorgeous, there's so many of these. I don't know their names, but they're just adorable little pick-me-pops. I've just shown you a few today. There must be hundreds in this house. I tell you, this is like a toy world. Toy world, toy world. Does anyone else collect these little pick-me-pops? They are so adorable. Oh, look, it's a fish. Fishy. It's a fishy. And, oh, so cute. What do you think? So, I'll try and show you many, many, many of them. Hopefully not get the same. Or a little bit similar. And then we just have a few little dudes keeping us company today. Gingy must be around here somewhere. You know, our little friend Gingerbread. And all our other wonderful, lovely toys. But today, I'm just going to get on to some scooting. I have lots, I said lots and lots and lots of these. The whole boxes must be about, I don't know, 20, 30 in each box. Anyway. But I don't know why I found this one, but I'm going to start with Mr. Rude. Mr. Rude, how do you do, huh? Let's see how he goes. Mr. Rude. Hopefully he's not nude. Mr. Rude is rude. He's very rude. He's very, very rude. In fact, he's worse than very, very rude. He's extraordinarily rude. Oh, extraordinarily. It's like in one of those fancy Nancy books, isn't it? He's not looking very happy, is he? When you meet somebody, you might think to yourself that the person has a large nose, but you wouldn't say anything to them, would you? Because that would be rude, wouldn't it? Well, Mr. Rude would just blurt it out, big nose, but he wouldn't stop there. Oh no, not Mr. Rude. Oh, I see. He just goes, big nose. With a nose like that, you could vacuum the floor. Can you imagine saying that to someone? Well, I hope you can't. Vacuum the floor with a big nose. And he was the same with everyone. If he met someone overweight, he would say, fatty, you're supposed to take the food out of the fridge, not eat the fridge as well. Oh dear. Is this really a children's book? This is a little bit rude, isn't it? If he was driving along in his car, he would yell things to people as he passed. Mr. Rude was a horrible man who didn't have a nice thing to say about anyone. And not surprisingly, no one liked him. There he is, yelling something out the window. One day, Mr. Rude met little Miss Tiny. Well, not so much met as nearly trod on her. Good morning, said little Miss Tiny. Look at the size of you, exclaimed Mr. Rude. Squirt, you're so tiny I could squash you under my thumb. Poor little Miss Tiny burst into tears and ran home. Oh, I see little Miss Tiny, there she is. A little bit small. Whew. Behind a tree on the other side of the street, Mr. Happy looked anything but happy. He had heard everything. Oh, there he is. Mr. Happy's hiding. I think he's heard that Mr. Rude has been very rude and he doesn't appreciate it. The next morning, Mr. Happy was outside Mr. Rude's house, suitcase in hand. Mr. Happy knocked on Mr. Rude's front door. Go away, shouted Mr. Rude. Mr. Happy knocked again. Mr. Rude opened the door. Can't you read? Said Mr. Rude, pointing to his doormat. Mr. Rude's doormat did not say welcome like everyone else's doormat. Mr. Rude had crossed that out and then in large black letters had written go away underneath. Well, Mr. Happy smiled, barged past Mr. Rude and went into the living room. "Get out!" shouted Mr. Rude. Mr. Happy smiled an even larger smile and sat down on the armchair. Okay. I wonder what he's up to, do you think? Mr. Rude exploded. He ranted and raged for half an hour, but Mr. Happy calmly sat through it all smiling. Eventually, Mr. Rude went into the kitchen to make himself supper without offering any to Mr. Happy. Okay, he's finally just gone to get himself some dinner. He's not offering his guest anything. After his supper, Mr. Rude ranted and raged for a full hour, but eventually Mr. Rude called him. Mr. Happy took no notice. Finally, Mr. Rude turned out the lights and went upstairs without offering Mr. Happy a bed for the night. So he's ranting and raging and roaring and rooving and Mr. Happy's not taking any of it. When he came down in the morning, Mr. Happy was still there, still smiling. "Okay, I give in," cried Mr. Rude. "What do you want?" "Well, breakfast would be nice," said Mr. Happy. "Please?" Mr. Rude made breakfast for him. "Oh, have some breakfast!" Look at him. "Have it! Take it away!" It was the first time that Mr. Rude's life that he had ever done anything for anybody else. In fact, it was the first time he had ever asked anybody what they wanted. "Thank you, Mr. Happy," when he had finished. "Right, you can go now," demanded Mr. Rude, but Mr. Happy did not budge. Mr. Rude ranted and raged and raged and ranted, but he ended up making lunch for Mr. Happy. And supper too. He's made him lunch, dinner, breakfast, all in one day. He offered Mr. Happy a bed for the night. Look at that. Mr. Happy stayed for 2 weeks. Slowly, the ranting and raging became less and less, and Mr. Rude discovered he had something that he had never known he possessed. He's getting a cup of tea or coffee now. Woo! He's excited. Manners. Mr. Rude has manners. We like manners, don't we? Yes, please, thank you. Come again. When it was time Mr. Happy to leave, he shook Mr. Rude's hand and said, "Thank you so much, Mr. Rude. I really enjoyed my stay." Mr. Rude beamed a smile that was every bit as wide as Mr. Happy's and found himself saying, "And so did I." Mr. Rude was a changed man. Belched Mr. Rude. Well, almost. Oh, what do you think of that book? I really like that. Mr. Rude, how do you do? All right. Well, I think we'll go turn it off. But we'll go straight to another Mr. Man book. What do you think? Okay? Yep. Say goodbye for me. Say goodbye. Woo! For me.